I had given everything to that kingdom. My sweat, my loyalty, my silence, and in return, I got a handful of seeds and a lesson I will never forget. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was a farmer. Not a rich man, not a powerful man. Just a man with calloused hands, a small piece of land, and a wife who believed in me more than I ever deserved. Her name was Shanti. She was the kind of woman who woke before sunrise to prepare food we could barely afford, who smiled through hunger, who never once complained even when the rain had drowned everything we had planted and the sun had scorched what the rain had left behind. She was my conscience. I didn't listen to her nearly enough. The kingdom of Madampa was ruled by King Javier. Everyone spoke about him like he was something holy, merciful, generous, a ruler who actually cared about his people. I had heard the stories. Farmers who had lost everything and been given a second chance by the king's grace. Widows who had received rice from the royal granary. Children who had been given medicine from the palace physicians. Everyone loved him. I thought those were just stories men told to feel better about their poverty. I thought kings were kings, distant, untouchable, and ultimately indifferent to men like me. That year, the rains came too hard and too long. They didn't stop for weeks. The fields flooded. The crops rotted where they stood. I remember standing at the edge of my land watching everything I had worked for dissolve into muddy brown water. I didn't cry. I was too tired to cry. I just stood there watching my future drown. That night, Shanti and I sat in the small lamplight of our house and talked in hushed voices the way poor people do, like even speaking too loudly about problems might make them worse. We have nothing left, I told her. No crop. No seed money. Nothing. She looked at me steadily. Go to the king, she said. I almost laughed. Shanti, do you know how many farmers are in this kingdom? Men like me don't just walk into the palace. The guards will turn me away before I even reach the gates. I've heard he is different, she said quietly. I've heard he actually listens. They always say that about kings. Kamal. She said my name with that particular weight she carried in her voice when she had already made up her mind for both of us. We have no food. We have no seeds. We have nothing to lose by trying. Go tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling thinking about pride and shame and desperation, and somewhere in that tangle of thoughts I made the decision to go. Not because I believed, but because I had nothing else left. What happened next changed everything, though not in the way I expected. I never made it to the palace that morning. Instead, the king came to me. He arrived at our fields at dawn, dressed plainly, walking among the ruined crops with his ministers like a man genuinely grieving something that was not even his. He moved through the mud. He touched the rotted stalks. He spoke to the farmers directly, not down at them from a horse, but eye to eye, man to man. When he reached me, he asked me what had happened. I told him. I told him everything. The floods, the lost harvest, the empty house, the seeds we couldn't afford. He listened. He actually listened. Then he ordered his ministers to arrange seeds for every affected farmer in the region. Good quality seeds. Enough to replant. Enough to start over. I walked home that day with a sack of seeds on my back and something strange happening in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. It felt like hope. Dangerous, fragile, embarrassing hope. And that's exactly when something dark began to move inside me. I don't know when the thought first arrived. I can't point to the exact moment. But somewhere between walking home with those seeds and sitting down at my table that evening, a small and poisonous idea had already taken root in my mind. What if I didn't use all the seeds? I told myself it was practical thinking. Smart planning. If I planted only a portion of the seeds, I could sell the rest. Get real money. Cash in hand. And if the king came back and saw my crop had failed, which it might, who could guarantee it wouldn't? He would give me more seeds. He was generous. He would understand. He would help again. Shanti was sitting across from me when I first said it out loud, testing the idea like you test thin ice with one cautious foot. She put down what she was holding and looked at me the way she sometimes did, like she could see straight through my skin. Don't, she said. Simply. One word. It's just practical. It's not practical. It's deception. He helped us, Kamal. He gave us a chance. And I'm taking it. I'm just being smart about it. You're being greedy. There's a difference. I didn't listen. I planted barely a quarter of the seeds in my field. The rest, a heavy, generous sack, I hid behind a loose board in our storage room. 2 days later I sold them to a merchant in the next village for a tidy sum. The coins felt good in my hand. Heavy and real in a way that hope never feels. Weeks passed. The other farmers' fields began to turn green. Shoots broke through the soil in neat, promising rows all across the valley. I watched my neighbors' crops rise with a cold feeling in my stomach that I refused to identify as guilt. My own field, planted with so few seeds, showed only thin, scattered growth. Barely anything. When the king returned to inspect the fields, I was ready with my story. The seeds, Maharaj, I said, bowing my head low. They just disappeared. I don't know what happened. I planted them and the field gave nothing. He looked at me. Just looked at me. I couldn't read his face. He was quiet for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Don't worry, he said finally. I'll arrange more seeds for you. I almost felt relief. Almost. But there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite name. Not suspicion exactly. More like patience. The kind of patience a man has when he is waiting for something he already knows is coming. I ignored it. I took the second batch of seeds, sold most of them again, planted a thin scattering, and waited. This time I was more confident. The first time had been easy. The king was generous, trusting, perhaps even a little naive. Good men, I had begun to tell myself, were easy to use. They believed in people. They wanted to believe. And that belief, that goodness, was a weakness I could press on again and again. Shanti stopped eating dinner with me during this period. She would prepare the food and leave it on the table and disappear into the other room. We barely spoke. When we did, she looked at me like she was grieving something. Not angry. Just sad. The kind of sadness that is worse than anger because it means someone has stopped expecting better from you. You're going to lose everything, she told me one night. Just that. Calm and certain as a weather prediction. I'm going to be fine, I said. She didn't argue. She just looked at me with those eyes, and I turned away. The king returned again. My field was barren again. I stood there in my familiar posture, head lowered, voice humble, story rehearsed. Maharaj, I can't explain it. The seeds vanished again. I'm desperate. My family has nothing. I had practiced this. The shake in the voice. The slight tremble of the hands. I had made myself look genuinely helpless, and I was good at it by now. But this time the king did something different. He didn't arrange seeds. He reached into his coat and produced a small cloth pouch, tightly tied. "No more seeds today," he said. "Take this instead. There is money inside, enough to buy seeds and supplies from any merchant in the market. But there is one condition." He held the pouch out to me and his eyes were steady, unreadable. "Do not open it until tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. An odd condition. But I took the pouch, thanked him with excessive gratitude, and walked home feeling like I had won something. That night I sat at the table with the pouch in front of me and told Shanti about it. She stared at it. He said not to open it until morning. He said a lot of things. Kamal. It's money, Shanti. Real money. I can feel the weight. Tomorrow I'll open it and I'll buy seeds, and this time I'll plant everything properly. And you're going to open it tonight, aren't you? I didn't answer. But I think we both knew. I waited until she had gone to bed. Then I sat alone with the lantern casting long shadows across the walls, and I untied the pouch. Nothing fell out. I tilted it, turned it upside down over the table, looked inside. Empty. I frowned, confused, then set it down on the table, and that's when I heard it, a tiny scratching sound from inside the storage room. I went to the storage room. The loose board where I had hidden my first sack of seed money, the board I thought no one knew about, was gnawed through. The remaining coins I had kept hidden, my secret hoard, the private fortune I had built through deception, it was gone. Every last coin. The floor was covered in scattered seed husks and small, dark droppings. Mice. The pouch hadn't been empty. It had been full of mice. The king had sewn them inside a cloth tight enough to muffle them until I was home and alone, and the damage could be done quietly, completely, without witnesses. I stood in that storage room for a long time. The lantern flickered. The walls felt very close. My legs went weak and I sat down on the floor right there in the dirt and the silence, and something cracked open inside me. Not dramatically. Not with a scream or tears. Just a slow, quiet cracking, like the sound ice makes before a whole shelf of it slides into the sea. He knew. He had known the whole time. The second sack of seeds. The patience in his eyes. The way he had given me another chance, and then another, not out of naivety but out of something much more calculated. He had been watching. He had been letting me build my own trap, nail by nail, plank by plank, until the whole structure was complete and all he had to do was send in the mice. In the morning I walked to the palace. Not to beg. Not with a story. Just to stand before him and face whatever was coming. "Maharaj," I said. "The money is gone." He looked at me calmly. "Is it?" "Yes." "How strange," he said, and there was something in his voice, not cruelty, not mockery, just a very quiet, very precise kind of irony. "Just like the seeds." The word landed in me like a stone dropped into still water. I felt the rings spreading out from the impact, touching everything. "You knew," I said. "I suspected," he said. The second time, I was certain. The court was silent around us. Ministers, guards, witnesses to my complete and total exposure. I had never felt so small in my life. Not during the floods. Not during the failed harvests. Not even standing at the edge of my drowned field watching everything dissolve. This was a different kind of small, the kind that comes from seeing yourself clearly for the first time and not liking what you see. "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. It surprised me how much I meant it. The king was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was not angry. That was somehow the worst part. "You came to me as a man with nothing," he said. "I gave you seeds, not charity, but a chance. And you took that chance and twisted it into a scheme. You stole from your neighbors, Kamal. Every seed you sold meant one less sack in the distribution. Every coin you kept was taken from a fund meant for farmers in genuine need." I had not thought about it that way. I had been so focused on my own small cleverness that I had never looked at the wider picture, at the farmers who might have received fewer seeds because I had drained the supply, at the families who had less because I had taken more. The shame of that was different from the shame of being caught. It went deeper. It settled somewhere permanent. "You will not be imprisoned," the king said. "But for the next 2 years, half of every harvest from your land goes directly to the royal granary. Consider it repayment. Consider it a lesson. Consider it a reminder that every grain you plant in the future was made possible by the generosity of people you tried to deceive." 2 years. Half of everything. I bowed and left. Shanti was waiting outside the palace gates. She had known I would go. She hadn't come inside. There was a dignity in that, her refusal to witness my humiliation. But she was there when I came out, standing in the early morning light with her hands folded and her face unreadable. We walked home in silence for a while. Then she said, "What now?" "We work," I said. "We plant everything. We give half. We rebuild." She didn't say "I told you so." She never said that. She just nodded slowly, like she had been waiting for me to find my way back to the man she had married, the one who existed before greed had taken up residence in his chest and rearranged the furniture. That first season I planted every seed I was given. I worked the soil before sunrise and after sunset. My hands blistered and bled. I didn't sell a single grain. When harvest came I delivered half to the royal granary myself, carrying the sacks on my own back, not because I had to but because I needed to feel the weight of what I owed. The king was there when I arrived. He didn't say anything ceremonial. He didn't make a speech. He just watched me set down the sacks and nodded once, the way a man nods when something has been understood between two people that doesn't need to be said out loud. I went back the following season and did it again. By the end of the second year, something had changed in me that I can't fully explain with words. The change wasn't just about honesty or following rules or fear of consequences. It was something more like clarity. I had spent so much energy being clever, calculating, playing angles, storing things away, protecting my little secret hoard, and all of that energy had produced nothing but anxiety and shame and a wife who couldn't look at me across the dinner table. When I stopped doing that, when I just planted and worked and gave what I owed without hiding anything, I slept. Deeply. Without calculations running through my head at 3 in the morning. Without checking the loose board in the storage room. Without rehearsing stories. There's a kind of exhaustion in dishonesty that you don't notice until it stops. The king lifted the condition at the end of the second year. He sent a messenger with a simple note that said my debt had been repaid and I was free to keep my full harvest. That season I had the best crop of my life. Shanti made a feast and invited our neighbors, and we ate together in the lamplight of our courtyard, and somewhere in the middle of that ordinary evening I looked across the table at her, and she was smiling at me again. Not the sad, guarded smile she had worn for years. The real one. The one that had made me fall in love with her. I thought about the king's trap then. The mice in the pouch. The quiet, perfect patience of a man who could have had me dragged before the court at any moment but chose instead to let me walk myself into a corner, let me see my own reflection in the dark, and then offered me a way back. That is a different kind of power than the kind I had been afraid of all my life. Not the power that crushes. The power that corrects. The power that looks at a broken man and decides he is worth fixing rather than discarding. I have never stolen a grain since. Not from the kingdom, not from my neighbors, not from the earth that feeds us all. But I will tell you this, and I want you to hear it carefully, because this is the part that keeps me up some nights even now. The worst betrayal in this story wasn't mine. The worst betrayal was the one I committed against myself. Against the man Shanti had believed in before the floods came and desperation cracked open a door inside me that should have stayed closed. I betrayed my own integrity. I betrayed my own name. And that kind of betrayal, the kind you commit against yourself in the quiet moments when no one is watching, that is the one you carry the longest. The king's mice ate my hidden coins in a single night. It took me 2 full years to eat through my own greed and come out clean on the other side. I am still farming the same small piece of land. My hands are still calloused. I am still not a rich man. But every seed I plant is mine, honestly earned and honestly sown, and every harvest I bring in I can look at without shame. Shanti says I laugh more now. She says I look younger somehow, which makes no sense because I am not a young man and the years have not been kind to my back or my knees. But maybe that is what happens when you stop carrying something you were never meant to carry. Maybe that is what it feels like when the weight finally comes off.